What vaccines do you need for a round the world trip? How much do the vaccines cost? And which ones are available for free on the NHS? There are several vaccine shortages currently in the UK, and so I'm going to share with you which ones you need to be prioritising when planning a trip abroad. So, let's jump into it. Firstly, what vaccines do you need? Now, the best place to go for information about what vaccines you need for your travels is always the government's travel website. And I'll link to that in the description below. If you find the country you're travelling to or countries, generally what you'll find is that website links to another website, which is travelhealthpro.org.uk. And on that website, it lists every single country in the world, and it gives you recommendations in terms of what is the current situation in that country and the risks for certain diseases. So for example, if we look at India, you're able to see what the vaccine recommendations are on the tab. Example, measles, mumps and rubella is recommended, and also diphtheria, tetanus and polio. There could also be more specific risks, so further down it will show you what most travellers need, and then it will show you what some travellers need. And so you can open these up to see what is the risk of those particular viruses in that country. It's also worth checking out as well the malaria risk in the country. Now, the countries where it is a risk, there'll be a tab, and you can scroll further down to find an actual map where there's going to be either high or low risk. So if you're going to a high risk area, then this is something to be aware of for malaria. But what I would recommend is you probably go to your GP first and ask them for the travel clinic. Now, in my case, my GP doesn't offer a travel clinic, so they recommended for me to go to Superdrug. And so I booked an appointment with the Superdrug travel clinic, and the nurse there went through this website with me, and bless her, it was 22 countries we had to go through together. So we went through every single country. She highlighted to me the ones that were most likely to be a risk for my travelling. And then from that, we then came up with a list of vaccinations that were required. So a disclosure here, I am not a medical professional, and so this information that I've put together in this video is information I've learned from speaking with travel nurses, and also it's the advice that I would recommend to anybody is always check with your doctor. So anyone who's watching this and is going to go travelling, go and speak directly to your doctor. This information is being shared just more for your research purposes and to give you an indication of what the costs might be. It is not recommendation of what you should be getting for vaccines. Vaccines do not 100% protect against any virus. If anyone's ever had a vaccine before, you'll know it doesn't give 100% protection. So you still have to take precautions when in those countries about trying to not get the disease. And I'll talk about some of them for specific ones, especially more like the mosquito bites later. So do also please be careful, and if you're ever feeling ill in a country, don't think, oh, well, I've had a vaccine, so I don't need to see a doctor. Go and seek medical advice if you are feeling ill, because it's always better to be safe than sorry. Also, one other thing to mention is that depending on the places you're visiting, certain travel insurance may require you to get the recommended vaccines. So it's also worth bearing in mind that that might be an extra cost that you'll need to cover, because if not, then you may not be covered on your insurance. So it's always worth checking. So what are the travel vaccines that are available? So I'll go through them individually. So there's diphtheria, which is a respiratory tract infection caused by a toxin, and this is spread via droplet infections. Now, even after completing the childhood vaccination schedule, you might still require a booster dose. So anyone in the UK, you'd probably been offered this when you're in school, but they do need to be repeated every 10 years. So if you are 10 years older than you were in primary school getting this, you're probably going to need a booster. Also tetanus as well, similarly, is a disease caused by a toxin that's present in soil and spores. So again, it's spread via wound contamination. You would have got a vaccine, or basically diphtheria, tetanus and polio were like your three you would have got together when you were a kid. But tetanus and diphtheria need to be repeated after 10 years, and also so does polio as well for a booster. Hepatitis A is a viral infection of the liver, and it's spread via contaminated food and water from human to human. The vaccination is usually given as a single injection, and it has a second dose 6 to 12 months later. 2 doses should protect you for about 25 years. All of those I've just mentioned there are all available on the NHS, or all available free in the UK. As mentioned, diphtheria, tetanus, polio you would have got at school, but you can go to your doctor and get those. Hepatitis B is a viral infection of the liver, spread from human to human via bodily fluids. It is a course of 3 injections, which can either be taken over a course of 3 months or over 21 days. And immunisation for this lasts for about 5 years. Now, technically, this can be offered through sexual health services here in the UK, so it could be classed as one you could get from them, or it can also be done privately. Now, rabies is quite a big one, and actually 99% of all rabies infections are actually from dog bites. This is a virus that affects the central nervous system, and it's spread via saliva from infected animals. So that's either dogs, monkeys, bats, or cats. If bitten, the recommendation is to wash the wound thoroughly under soap and water for around 10 minutes, and it helps to kill the virus in the wound. If you're unvaccinated, then you should receive rabies emergency injections. But be aware that not all emergency treatment is available in all countries. It's once you've had that vaccination, it's valid for around 1 to 2 years afterwards. The next one is meningitis, ACWY. This is a bacterial infection which is spread via droplets. This vaccine is only for people under the age of 25 though, and boosters are recommended if you need it for a work certificate, but they're not generally recommended for travellers. Are you finding this information useful? Then hit the subscribe button below. I'll be putting new videos out every Monday about my travels around the world, and I'll be doing the next couple of weeks putting out videos around all of my planning for a trip around the world. So come and be my travel companion. Next up, it's typhoid. So this makes it sound like it's some kind of competition, but it's not a competition of diseases. So typhoid is an illness that's caused by a bacterium, and it's spread over contaminated food and water. You can get an injectable booster every 2 years or have an oral one every 5 years. Then in a similar area, cholera is also a contamination of food and water, and it could be found especially in slum areas or refugee camps or after natural disasters like flooding. It's actually a drink, this one, not an injection, and you would take 2 drinks, and you can't eat an hour before you have this drink. I actually thought it tasted very nice. And it provides 2 years of protection once you've had it. Now we're going to jump into the mosquito-based or blood-borne viruses that can be spread via mosquitoes. So generally, let's talk about some of the advice around this, because if anyone's travelled and been to somewhere where there's mosquitoes, you know they're an absolute nightmare once they start to bite. But certain areas in the world are more of a risk than others. The general advice, even if you have full course of vaccinations for everything, is to use DEET, which has a minimum of 50%. It lasts for around 12 hours, and it needs to be applied after you've applied suntan lotion or after you've been swimming or sweating, because it can then reduce the effectiveness. Also, it's highly recommended if you're in a mosquito risk area to use mosquito nets at night. Be aware that mosquitoes can also be present in cities as well. A lot of people think that they're only either in rural areas. And yeah, if your sleeping area isn't sealed at night, like the room isn't a sealed place, then the mosquito net is key really. Or if you do have air conditioning, that's also a great recommendation. Or also wearing long sleeve clothing, therefore it acts as a protection barrier against your skin from mosquitoes. Finally, there's a recommendation that you can use a knockdown spray or a plug-in that can help to actually kill off any mosquitoes that might have entered the room during the day. It's probably worth checking with accommodation you're booking, because if they're in an area where mosquitoes are highly prevalent and there's risk of disease, then they will usually have some of these features in there. So the first one, and this is quite an important vaccine that's actually a requirement for entry into some countries, is yellow fever. So this is an acute viral infection, and it's spread via the daytime biting mosquitoes. It's just 1 injection to be vaccinated, and the vaccine is a requirement for entry, as I said, in some countries. So you get a certificate once you've had your vaccination. And generally it provides lifelong protection, but if you're going to high-risk areas, then you may be able to get a booster. The next one is tick-borne encephalitis. Now, this vaccine is currently in a shortage in the UK, and so I would recommend if you're going to be travelling to an area where this is required, then it's going to need to be up on the priority list to try and sort, because you might struggle to find clinics where they have either the dose that you can take for all 3 of them. So it's an infection again of the central nervous system spread by ticks and ingestion of unpasteurised infected dairy products. You can either have 2 injections for 1 year's immunisation or 3 injections for 3 years. And then another one that's similar is Japanese encephalitis, and again there's a shortage on this. It again affects the central nervous system. It's spread via nighttime biting mosquitoes in rural areas, particularly in rice fields, paddy fields, pig farms and marshlands. Now, this you need 2 doses, and it gives you up to 12 to 24 months of immunisation. Now, again, all these immunisations are not 100%, so you need to make sure you're taking your other precautions. But both these 2 vaccinations currently are on shortage. I had to ring round, well, actually, I had to ring Superdrug to find out where they had other clinics that had these vaccines to go and get the vaccines from there. And thankfully, they managed to have enough to treat me for the course that I needed. But it's just worth bearing in mind that the first place you go may not have these. You may have to book and find other places. Anti-malaria is also something to be aware of if you're going to a malaria high-risk location. And so you can actually take anti-malaria tablets. Now, there's 2 types of tablets you can take. You can either take a 30-day course, but if you want to take a less of a course, it's a bit more expensive, but it's a 7-day option. So you would take basically 2 days before you enter the risk area, whilst you're in the risk area, and then 7 days after. And the benefit of taking the shorter course is that when you take these anti-malaria tablets, they make you sensitive to the sun. And so if you're going to be in the sun for quite a bit of time after, if you're continuing travelling, then it is something to be aware of. There are actually some diseases that you can't get vaccinated against at the moment. So these are dengue fever, which is spread by daytime biting mosquitoes, and it initially causes a fever, a headache, muscle pain, and joint pain. There's also Chikungunya fever, which is also spread via daytime biting mosquitoes, similar kind of symptoms. There's also the Zika virus, which is also, again, a daytime biting mosquito, which mainly shows a fever, headache, muscle or joint pain, or conjunctivitis. There's also Schistosomia, I think, which is basically spread via parasites living in freshwater lakes and rivers that are not clean. So it's worth being aware that even if you do get all the vaccinations recommended, there are still viruses out there you can catch and become ill with. So again, the recommendation is always going to be, if you don't feel well, seek medical advice. As mentioned before, some of the vaccines are available in the NHS for free. So that's your diphtheria, your tetanus, your polio. You can buy them. They're around £37 for all 3, just one injection or just one course of treatment. Then there's also hepatitis A, which is around £60, or you can get that on the NHS. Hepatitis B, which is available through sexual health clinics potentially. And also typhoid and cholera could be available on the NHS. But for myself, because I can't go through my GP for some of these, so I've had to pay. So I want to share with you how much that is. So typhoid was £35. Hepatitis B was around £156, it's £52 a dose. Rabies was £207 in total. Meningitis, £55. Yellow fever, £69. Cholera, £64. Tick-borne encephalitis was £195. And the Japanese encephalitis was £315. And then finally the anti-malaria tablets for the shorter course after your exposure is £36. These prices are correct as of March 2024, and they've all been taken from the Superdrug UK Travel Clinic. So what other questions might you have around how these vaccinations work? So one of them is, can you get multiple vaccines at the same time? And yes, the answer is you can. I think on my first visit, I ended up having 2 injections in that arm, 2 injections in that arm. I drank the cholera vaccine as well. So I felt very attacked at that first appointment, but they don't interact with each other in any way. I felt a little bit tired later on in the evening, but it will ultimately depend on how your body processes these as well. How many weeks do I need to speak to a travel nurse before I travel? So this is a good question, and I was nervous because I booked my flight and there was maybe 6 weeks before I left, so I was like, They are able to do a rapid dose of some of these. The earlier you speak to them, the more options you have, because you can then take maybe the cheaper route, which takes a couple of months to be vaccinated, or with other ones you can get a faster treatment or faster vaccination, but it will cost more money. Where can you get your vaccines from? As mentioned, I went to Superdrug just because my GP doesn't have a travel clinic. So I found they were really helpful, very friendly. I've visited maybe 4 or 5 stores now because of the different shortages, and every single travel nurse that I've met has been so helpful, so friendly. I would really recommend. Also, the benefit as well is that you are going to have to spend money on these vaccines, but if you get a Superdrug card, then you can get points on there, and then you can use those points to actually buy, for example, like DEET and other stuff you're going to need for travelling. So it's actually, you get some of the money back that you spend, you can use to help for some of the recommendations to prevent your infections. You will also get a little travel card like this where all your vaccinations will be jotted down, so keep that safe. The vaccines are a personal choice, and I know that people have very strong opinions about vaccines, but the way that I see it for me personally is that if they are recommended, I'm going to take them because I'd rather be as protected as possible. And it's going to come down to what type of trip you're doing, because if you're travelling maybe for 2 or 3 months, you might think, I'll take the risk because I'm coming back home and I know I've got good healthcare when I get back home and it's all free. But if you're going to be doing a long stint of travel, then it might be advisable to get the vaccines, because that way it means that your recovery time will be faster. You still need treatment if you get these viruses, but by having the vaccines, it means less treatment's required. And ultimately, it then means it has less of an impact on your ongoing travel plans. So also, again, be aware insurances might require some vaccines depending on what's recommended. So yeah, I hope you found this video useful. And if you did, then hit the subscribe button below. There'll be another video next Monday. Thanks for watching.